Looks like you didn't need me while you were having fun with Banks at his apartment, I say. No more games. Now I'm furious. Brian, sex is so not important, Banks says. It's just a different way of communicating. Our traditional morals are preventing us from finding ourselves. Please don't let a little thing like sex get in the way of our growth together. Get out. I yell. If I hear that self-actualization crap one more time, I'm going to throw up. As she walks away, she sobs. I guided the small inflatable boat towards the shore, marveling at the stunning hues of pink, purple, and orange painting the sunset against the backdrop of Marvin Beach's white sands and black rocks. With no one in sight, I felt a sense of relief. Thursdays were typically quiet here, making my task simpler as darkness approached. Despite the tranquility, this beach held bittersweet memories for me. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning, much like the sunrise, and I harbored no regrets. Months earlier, Hillary and I had found ourselves in a situation akin to those HGTV reality shows where couples seek a new life in a tropical paradise. Having grown weary of the grey skies of the Pacific Northwest after 6 years of marriage in Seattle, we ventured to Hawaii for a vacation. It was there that we decided the Kona area of the Big Island would be our new home. While the allure of sunny skies was undeniable, our decision was also influenced by practicalities. We debated between a house and a condo, each with its own advantages and drawbacks. Ultimately, we opted for a condominium for its low maintenance and potential for quicker social connections. Alley Drive is an oceanfront road that runs south from downtown Kona toward Kaho Bay. It is lined with homes and condos, and every morning runners, walkers, and bicyclists go up and down it getting their daily dose of exercise. The condo we stayed at, the Kona Palms, was about a mile south of town and was one of the larger complexes. It had a nice large pool with a hot tub. There was a covered outdoor seating area with a barbecue and a very nice workout area with machines and free weights in an air-conditioned room in front of the pool. Our unit, 508, was in the front building overlooking the ocean. It also had 3 bedrooms, a beautiful master bedroom overlooking the ocean, a decent-sized guest room, and a small bedroom in the back overlooking the pool. This would be my office. The realtor said that 3-bedroom condos with an ocean view are rare, and we should count on it. She may have exaggerated the need for urgency, but we offered full price and got it. Oh, Brian, I'm so excited, Hillary purred as we closed the condo purchase. I feel like our life is going to turn into a permanent vacation. Brian, I love you. This was the move for us, she exclaimed. I'm glad you like it, and I do too. But as for a permanent vacation, I have a more than full-time job, and yes, you have a tight schedule. We still have to maintain this new lifestyle, I said. I know, Hillary said, but let me just think about a vacation for now. I smiled at her and gave her a hug. This really was my dream, and I was glad that Hillary was happy here too. We were actually in pretty good shape. The house I sold in Kirkland allowed us to easily pay the rent and monthly installments after the purchase. We had a good amount of capital left, and there was also my secret account, which Hillary didn't know about at the time. Hillary is an emergency nurse, and because of her experience, she easily found a job at Kona County Hospital. She negotiated a shift schedule of 3 10-hour day shifts. I am a commodities broker. I can live anywhere. I worked in an office in downtown Seattle for the first 10 years. The knowledge I learned from the veterans in that office allows me to work remotely now. By the time we got the keys and moved in, we had been on the Big Island for about 8 weeks. We were adjusting to the new way of life. I had to keep an eye on the markets and socialize with people on the mainland. I was usually up at 4 a.m. and working in my office by 5. Hillary worked Monday through Wednesday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Thursday. She relaxed and recovered, and by Friday, she went into vacation mode. I knew her job was challenging and stressful. When I could, I would leave early on Thursdays and Fridays, and we would start our weekends. We moved in on Wednesday and in the process met a few new neighbors. Everyone seemed friendly, and the people were diverse, older, younger, singles, couples, and different ethnicities. We learned that the condo was hosting a Poana night this Friday. Everyone would gather in the pool area around 6 p.m. There was food, sometimes music, and everything was optional. Apparently, it happened a couple of times a month, and there were different events or themes. Everything was planned through the general manager of the condominium. We entered the restaurant around 6 with a chilled bottle of white wine and a 6-pack of beer in an ice chest. We found a free table and were seated. We met a lot of people, and everyone seemed nice with varying levels of friendliness. There were definitely some heroes of their own. One of the first people we met was Clarence and Lynn. They are a gay couple who moved from San Francisco. They live at the Palms full-time. Clarence is a large, older black man who taught economics at UC Berkeley. Lynn was a stockbroker who retired in his early 50s. I got the impression that money was not a problem for them. Then we met Bob and Ramona Platt. The Platts were in their 50s, originally from Texas, and had lived here for a short time. Bob was a builder who made his money developing land in and around Houston. Both were a little heavy-set, dressed in brightly colored flowered shirts, good-natured, and seemed to like whiskey. I like everything about Hawaii, but I can't stand flowery shirts. Another interesting couple was Banks Redmond and Chloe Davenport. They're married. We learned that Chloe works as a vice president at a large bank in Southern California, and Banks is a psychologist by training but also considers himself a real estate developer investor. Chloe seems to be shuttling back and forth between Hawaii and Los Angeles. Banks said that for now, he's working at the Palms full-time. I have a project I'm working on locally, actually on the high-low side. We can drive down there sometime, and take a look at it if you'd like, explained Banks. Banks looked about 5 or 6 years older than me. He was in his late 30s or maybe 40s. Chloe looked a little older. She was slim and attractive, with a serious expression on her face, blonde with fair skin. She looked rich, which as we later found out, she was. Banks was swarthy, probably of Mediterranean descent. He was a few inches taller than me, about 6'2" inches, very tanned, and in good shape. He had a scruffy look, but so far, he was a nice guy. I met many other people at Poana, but I had a long conversation with Banks. He told me that he counseled people informally. He called himself a relationship specialist, whatever that meant. He was interesting and had some charisma. He asked about my business and how we had chosen Kona as a place to live. While we were talking, I realized that Hillary hadn't been at our table in a while and casually glanced over to see where she was. She was talking to a young, skinny surfer with a deep tan and curly blonde hair. He looked to be in his early 20s. They were laughing and standing pretty close. Banks noticed me watching them. "That's Corey White," he told me. "He's a resident at Palms." "Woman hunter," Banks explained. "I get up to go into seed. I did a calming exercise, deep inhale, deep exhale, deep inhale, deep exhale." I looked back at Banks, and he had this look on his face like he was mentally analyzing the situation. "Hi Hill," I announced, wrapping my arms around her waist, and kissing her cheek. "Oh Brian," I think I surprised her, and it took her a moment to calm down. "This is Corey. He's a marine biologist. He's been telling me about what lives in the ocean." "Brian Rivers," I said, extending my hand. "Nice to meet you," Corey replied. He grabbed my hand, and I squeezed it even tighter. His expression changed from friendly to "what the hell are you doing?" Deep breaths, deep breaths. Hillary went on and on about what an interesting man he was and how he had suggested that we ride on his boat to see the dolphins and sharks and so on. I just stood there with a silly smile on my face and nodded. "See you," I said, and directed Hillary back to our table. When I looked back, White gave me a perplexed look. We returned to our table, and Hillary started talking to Chloe and Ramona. I just watched the events unfold, my attention never wavered from White. "Don't worry, he never preys on married people," I heard a deep ringing baritone. It was Clarence. "Excuse me?" I asked. "I saw you watching young Mr. White," said Clarence, a pleasant man. "And it's not bad to watch him either, but I wouldn't worry about him and married women." "I'm not worried about any of that," I stammered. I was a little embarrassed that Clarence had noticed my jealousy. "Same thing, my boy. Rest assured, Corey is a young, red-blooded heterosexual, but he has his own set of rules. Married women are definitely off-limits to him. He and I have had many ethical discussions." "Thank you for the information, but I assure you it doesn't bother me," I replied. "Good, good. All good relationships are built on trust," Mr. Rivers stated, Clarence, and departed, giving me a friendly pat on the shoulder. Sitting at the table, I thought about Clarence's words. It was almost exactly a year ago we were invited to a party by one of Hillary's co-workers when we lived in Kirkland, just outside of Seattle. These parties can be fun, but sometimes they boil down to hospital gossip and complaining about work, which can get boring for an outsider like me. Hillary was excited and looked great. She is about 30 years old, 3 years younger than me. She has thick, dark blonde shoulder-length hair. She has a sloping body. I think it was her open smile and beautiful eyes that initially caught my attention. Truth be told, when I first saw her, I was only interested in getting her into my bed. But then I got to know her better. That story could wait, but it can't be helped. She really does give off a sexual energy. I'm used to her attracting male, and sometimes female, attention. I'm just trying to stay calm, deep breaths, deep breaths. Anyway, we get to a party at the home of one of her friends and Carly's co-workers. It's the usual crowd. I know about a third of the group by name, and another third I've seen at some similar events before. When we walked in, I saw an old high school soccer teammate, John Washington. He is hard to miss. John is huge and seems to have gotten even bigger since high school. We played soccer together at Meteoma High School. I was a running back, and John played on the offensive line. We weren't friends in high school, but we were friends. I was glad to see him. We ended up having a beer, talking, and working things out. It turned out that his wife, Mandy, works as a midwife at Overlake Hospital, the same hospital where Hillary works. John and I, and a few other people, sat in one corner talking about sports, women, and the usual topics. About an hour and a half into the party, the energy changes a bit. A couple of guys from the group I was with looked toward the door, and the conversation seemed to stop for a minute. And then there are loud cheers about something. I looked around, and then a tall, dark-haired guy walked into the party. I'm straight, of course, but I have to admit that the guy was good-looking. As I watched him walk in, I looked across the room at Hillary. She looks at the guy, and then I see Carly and another friend looking at Hillary. Carly whispers something, and then they all giggle. What was that? My antenna is up, but I'm acting calm. A few of the guys I'm chatting with start talking about him, and I find out his name is Greg Gorsuch. Turns out he's been working in Boston for the last 4 or 5 years, and now he's back in Seattle. He's some kind of cool doctor. I look over and see Hillary hugging him tightly. When she starts to look in my direction, I am once again involved in the discussion my group has been having. I want to keep secretly watching to see what happens. I admit I can get jealous, but I try to apply my calming techniques to stay calm throughout the evening. Dr. Gorsuch and Hillary do not take a step away from each other. At one point, I noticed that they have separated themselves from the others and are seated in a quiet corner. Now I can remain calm, but at this point, I apologize and walk over to them, putting my arm around Hillary's shoulders. I look up at him and introduce myself. Brian Rivers, I say, and shake Gorsuch's hand. Greg Gorsuch, he replies with a charismatic smile. Greg, this is my husband, Brian, Hillary says. You're married? He says with a slightly shocked expression on his face. Hillary doesn't usually wear a wedding ring because of her job in the emergency room. Yes, didn't I mention that? Hillary hissed. She looks alternately at me and Gorsuch. Gorsuch quickly picks up on it and says, oh, maybe it is. Anyway, Brian, you have a beautiful bride. Congratulations to you both. Now, I don't want to take up anyone's time. There are others I need to meet, said Gorsey with a quick kiss on Hillary's cheek and a squeeze on my shoulder. He withdrew. An awkward silence hung between me and Hill. So, you know this guy? I asked Hillary. She looked at me with a certain tinge of guilt on her face. Yes, he worked at Swedish when I was there before we were married, she said. And I asked, he was part of a young group that sometimes hung out together, she said, this with some awkwardness in her voice. Well, you definitely spent a lot of time with him tonight. Did you go out with him? I asked. No, not really. We were just friends. Now let's just forget about it, she said. I know I don't have it all figured out, but I'm jealous, I admit it. But sometimes she gives me reason to be jealous. She's never done anything, but she's flirty, and I know she had a bit of a wild past. I didn't know all the stories, but I'd heard some things. About 3 weeks after the party, I got a call out of the blue from my old high school buddy, John Washington. John's office is not far from mine in downtown Seattle, and he asked me to meet him for a beer at one of the downtown bars after work. Sure, John, my pleasure, I said. That's a little weird. I like John, but we've never really been close friends. When I asked him what's up, he just said, we'll talk tonight. I met John at Pine Cone, an upscale bar near Pioneer Square. We ordered beers, and I asked, what was up? Brian, it's none of my business, but you're my friend, and I have a duty to let you know what's going on, he said. Shall we continue? I was confused. What's going on? I was starting to get turned on. Calm down and let me explain, replied John. Deep breath, deep breath. Mandy works with your wife at Overlake. Remember that guy all the girls were looking at Carly's party a few weeks ago? He asked. Who? I asked, but I thought I already knew. You know, Miss Soap Opera GQ who is fashionably late, he explained. Yeah, I know who you mean, Greg. What about him? I didn't like where this was going. I was starting to get angry, and John could sense it. Calm down, Brian, let me get to the point, John calmly continued. Mandy said this guy is in Overlake now. Apparently, your wife has had lunch with him a few times, just the two of them. Mandy says they always sit alone in the cafeteria away from everyone else. So far, so good, not too bad. And she says they look too cozy, and this guy has a reputation. What's the reputation? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. I know his type. Tall, handsome, ladies' man type, usually get any woman they want. Mandy also said she heard, like, they had some sort of relationship back in the day. What kind of relationship? I asked. Mandy didn't know. That's all she heard, said John. Hillary and I were talking about old boyfriends and my old girlfriends, but I had never heard of Dr. Greg until that party. He's a player, John said. Mandy stays away from him. Did something happen to Hillary that she saw? I asked John. Mandy didn't think so, but on Thursday this week, a group of them are going to go after work. Your wife tried to get Mandy to come, but she refused. And when Mandy tried to say something to your wife about Mr. Wimpy Hound, your wife just laughed and said he was harmless. Look, you're my friend and teammate, and I'm only relaying what Mandy told me, but if it were me, I'd definitely make sure all this cozy business stopped, exclaimed John. He had a drink, and I told him the beer was on me and that I was going to sit for a few minutes. We said goodbye, and he wished me luck. My initial reaction was to go home and crash with her, but say what? That I'd heard she'd had lunch with an old friend a few times. She would accuse me of jealousy and immaturity. Plan B was to see what would happen Thursday night. For a couple of days, I was to keep a low profile and pretend nothing happened. On Wednesday after work, she told me about the meeting on Thursday. According to Hillary, a group of nurses were going out for drinks and possibly a bite to eat. She said I would be dining alone that night. I had a plan. I purposely didn't ask where they were going. Interestingly, she didn't offer that information either. Later that night, I texted JN and asked him to ask Mandy to find out where the party would be held after work and that Mandy not inform Hillary of my request. He hummed approvingly and said he would text me the location tomorrow. Just after noon, I received a text from John. Belinda is at Bell at 6 p.m. Thank you, I sent back. During the day on Thursday, I had no calls or texts from Hill. After work, I went to my gym and worked out. I left the gym around 7 o'clock and got to Belinda's at 7:30. I ordered takeout. Their food is actually pretty good. The place looked busy, and I saw Hillary's car in the parking lot. I walked in and told the waitress that I had an order. I was told to pay at the bar and that everything was almost ready. I noticed a group of them at a large table at the bar. As I slowly approached, I saw several nurses I recognized, and in one corner sat Hillary and Dr. Greg. I couldn't tell if he was hugging her or just leaning on the back of her chair. Either way, he was trying to occupy his territory. They seemed to be having a private conversation away from the rest of the group. I walked over in faint surprise. "Hillary," I exclaimed, and our eyes met. "Brian," she almost shouted, "what are you doing here?" Several things were happening at this point. She pulled away from the doctor with a guilty look. He was furious that I had interrupted him, and then quickly put on a friendly and innocent look. He held out his hand for a handshake, but I ignored him. A few of the other nurses giggled at the situation. "Just want to have dinner," I said, "have a good time." At this point, I grabbed my food and left. As I drove away, I saw that the door of the restaurant was open. Hillary saw me drive away. By the time I got home, I was pretty hungry. While I ate, I turned on Sports Center and had a beer. I wondered how long it would take Hillary to get home. If everything was innocent, she would continue her evening and get home closer to evening. If, on the other hand, she felt guilty, she would get home fairly quickly. My wait wasn't long. She came in as if nothing had happened, but she kept her eyes on me to gauge my mood. "Gosh, you surprised me at Belinda's," she said. "Why didn't you stay and visit me?" She added, "You looked like you were having a good time." "And I didn't want to disturb you," I said with sarcastic innocence. "Well, you could at least say hello to the others," she said. "Ha! The others," I said. "I only noticed your long-lost doctor friend." I think by this point she knew I was a little angry but was going to try to make it my problem. Here we go, there's that jealousy thing again. Greg is a friend of mine that I haven't seen in a while, and he and I were just hanging out. Why do you always think every guy is trying to get in my pants? Other than at a party, I haven't seen him in years, and we were good friends when we were all at Swedish Hospital. Oh, I see, I say, other than at the party, you didn't get a chance to socialize with him at work, and that's what you did tonight. Exactly, she says, so there's no chance of catching up at the hospital. Repeated I, Brian. No, I'm busy at work, she states firmly, her voice getting a little louder. Okay, that means no eating together, not just the two of you in the corner of the cafeteria a few times in the last 3 weeks. So just so I understand definitively, you haven't spent any one-on-one time with the guy they call a wimp? I ask with feigned innocence. Well, maybe, she says meekly. Forget it, Hillary, you lied to me, you know it, and I know it, I tell her quietly but firmly. What do you have to say for yourself? I ask. She turns away, and that's when the tears start. She knows this is my weakness, and I feel like she wants me to hug her and tell her everything will be okay. Absolutely not, I say. Like I said, Hillary is kind of a coet, but at least to my knowledge, she has never lied to me. This caused a crack in my trust in her. When I ask her to explain again, she runs upstairs crying. I realize again that she wants me to come and comfort her, but it doesn't happen. When I go upstairs, I see that she is in the guest bedroom. With my job, I'm up and out of the house early, long before she gets up. At work, I get distracted, but I decide something in my life, with or without Hillary. I will leave the dreary weather of Washington State, and move to Hawaii. Several people from my office have moved and are working remotely. One of my good buddies, Randy, who started working around the same time I did, lives in North Idaho, and he loves it. He asks me all the time why I still go to the office, why don't I live where I want to live, since there are no advantages to having an office in Seattle. I have always loved beaches, and Hawaii is my favorite island. The weather, the ocean, the beaches, the people, we vacation there every year, and I decided the Kona area was my favorite. Although Hillary liked Hawaii too, she wasn't willing to move. That was the cause for concern. After lunch, I researched real estate in the Kona area. I usually get home before Hillary, but when I got home Friday night, she was already there. This is going to be interesting, I thought. Hey honey, she called out to me as I walked in, I've got salmon on the barbecue, you want a beer? I walked into the kitchen, and she was acting like Thursday never happened. I took the beer from her, but I didn't kiss her. I took the day off, the house needed to be cleaned, and I wanted to have dinner at home tonight. Sound good? She asked. I sat and looked at her. What? She asked. I'm still waiting for an explanation after you lied to me yesterday, I stated. Oh, Brian, I wasn't lying, I was just confused. I knew you were mad, and I didn't want to upset you more, she tried to brush it off. Now what do you want, teriyaki sauce or dry rub for the salmon? She asked. I don't care about the damn salmon, I want to know why you lied to me, I said. I rarely use profanity, so she knew I was furious. What's the big deal? She objected. Greg was at the restaurant, and we were talking. I'm allowed to have friends, or are you too insecure for that? She went on the offensive. I was getting really angry. My therapist was whispering in my ear, deep breaths, deep breaths. Here are the facts. You spent over an hour with this guy at Carly's one-on-one party, and he didn't know we were married. The subject was never brought up during the entire conversation. Fact 2, you regularly have lunch with him, just the two of you in the cafeteria, and it causes gossip in the workplace. Fact 3, you socialized with him at Belinda separately from the rest of the group. And finally, fact 4, you lied to me about seeing him, just catching up. By my calculations, you had at least 6 hours to meet with him one-on-one. So what's the big deal? She just sat there looking down. Mentally, I prepared myself for the possibility that my marriage might end and began to think about a fresh start in Hawaii. I truly loved Hillary and loved everything we did together, but I didn't tolerate the lies. I knew I was jealous, and if I didn't get the truth out of her, it would be over. She continued to remain silent, and finally, I'm sorry, I've been unfair to you. But can I explain? She said. I sat and waited. As you know, my father left when I was 10 years old. I've always needed a man's approval. I know you know that. In high school, I always picked the bad boy jocks. I had a certain reputation. When I graduated from nursing school, all those bad boy jock types were transplanted by doctors. Confident alpha males turned me on back then, I'll admit it. I knew some of it, but not all of it. When I got a job at Swedish Hospital after nursing school, there were a lot of young people there, and we formed a kind of clique. Carly and some of the doctors were in it, including Greg. I dated a few, but nothing lasted. It seemed like all they wanted was sex. I didn't know if I wanted to hear so many details. All the women were attracted to Greg, and he was a bit of a player. I guess I was in love with him too. I started dating one of his friends, Nick, a radiologist. I soon realized it wasn't serious, but we continued dating for a few more months. I also learned that Nick and Greg were roommates and good friends. One night we were at a party, Nick and I, and Greg was there too. I wasn't sure whose house it was. There was a lot of drinking, and apparently Nick talked me into going to one of the bedrooms upstairs. I had a few drinks too. It's definitely TMI, but I had to hear how it all turned out. We were doing it in someone's room, and after, we were just laying there. Greg came into the room. He said it was by mistake, he must have had a lot to drink too. He sat down on the bed and started talking to us. Nick said he had to go to the bathroom and would be right back. I expected Greg to leave, but he didn't. Well, I kind of fell in love with him, and he started proposing. Stop, I yelled. Are you telling me you had fun with him too? I asked. For a full minute, she didn't say a word. Finally, sort of at this point, she's crying, and I'm furious. My wife is. I don't know what to do. I guess the good news, if you can call it that, is that at least I found out the truth. No one would make this up, she then tells him. She feels awful. The next morning, Nick asks if the three of them, her, him, and Greg, can get back together. She slaps him, and that's the end of their relationship. She learns from others that she is starting to get a bad reputation at the hospital. She quits partying and focuses on her career and the rest of her life. Shortly after that, I met you, she said. You dated his friend, I stated firmly. I know, I was so stupid, but I was in love with him, she wailed. So, you're still in love with him, is that what this is about? I asked. No, I love you. I was confused. Suddenly, this guy I was once interested in was now interested in me. I would never do anything about it, it was just flattering. I told her I needed to think about it. We never had dinner, and I headed out for a walk that ended up dragging on for hours. No wonder it's raining. A month ago, I was happy, things were going great. I had a beautiful woman as a wife, and I didn't care about anything. Now, I question my wife's morals, and I'm not sure I trust her. One thing was certain, I would definitely be leaving Puget Sound for Hawaii with or without Hillary. Then again, I knew she was a little wild before we got married, but having fun with a guy and his roommate, that was pretty depraved. On the other hand, we weren't married and didn't even know each other at the time. I had some casual sexual encounters before we were married. When I finally made it home, I was confused about a few things. One thing I was sure of, I was moving to Hawaii. The next few days were pretty stressful. I was still trying to figure out what to do about Hillary. I believed she hadn't done anything with this Greg guy, but I believed she was getting too close to him. At one point on Saturday afternoon, I was ready to divorce her and move to Hawaii for a fresh start. On the other hand, I thought back to all the wonderful vacations Hillary and I had spent in Hawaii. The thought of being there without her wasn't as good as being there with her. I'll have to think about what to do. Apparently, we stayed together and moved in together. Hillary swore her love for me, and denied any attraction to Greg. I wanted to believe her, and I kind of did. I needed to keep an eye on her. Our life on Elia Drive was wonderful. She worked 3 days a week, and I had my own schedule. There were busy periods in my business, but there were also plenty of times when I could skip out. When she wasn't working, my workload would go up and down. It really was like a permanent vacation. I ran on Drive almost daily, and when Hillary was free, we hiked together. We explored the island and found beautiful waterfalls, jungle, majestic views, and amazing beaches. One of the features of the Big Island is that it is the newest island in the Hawaiian island chain, therefore, there are fewer beaches. The good beaches had to be traveled by car to get to, but they were worth it. Two of our favorite beaches were Quab and Horner Beach, but one particular beach we liked was Malaina Beach. This Thursday, we decided to explore Malaina Beach. At this time, we had not been there yet. Following the directions in the guidebook, we turned onto the road leading to this beach. Across the road was a chain and a sign that read "Closed for turns." From where we stopped, we could see the ocean, and it seemed like it was only a mile or so away. We decided to walk along the lava rock to see it. It was definitely worth it. Malaina Beach is beautiful, fine white sand and blue-green ocean. It was spectacular. We walked up and down the beach and realized there was no one else on the entire beach, probably because everyone knew the road was closed on Thursdays. We picked a spot to sit in the sun and enjoy the beach. After a while, I wanted to cool off. I went for a swim, and when I came back, she suggested we have some fun. She just laughed and said, "Since there's no one else, why not?" I can't believe we just made love to my wife on the beach. We stayed at Malaina Beach for a few more hours and then headed back to the car. After we got home, Hillary went to take a shower. What a wonderful day. I felt that I had made the right choice in moving to Hawaii and the right choice in staying with Hillary. The next day, as I leave the training room, I notice Banks on the lawn, slowly and carefully performing a martial arts kata. He's wearing only shorts, no shoes, and no shirt. The guy is in good shape, his skin is a golden brown color. I remember that he has an elegant look, not like me, a little more stocky and muscular. As I was leaving, he called out to me, "Brian, how are you doing?" We start talking, and end up planning dinner for Friday night. No poana this week. We grab a poke at an establishment in town, and on the way back, we stop and have a drink at Dawn, the beach com. Banks tells me about his development project near Pahoa on the Hilo side. He has a development plan for the lot he purchased. He also talks about his counseling practice. He says his mission is to help couples build more fulfilling relationships. He says his clients usually don't pay and that he is approached by word of mouth. My goal is to help people explore all that life has to offer, not to be limited by other people's ideas and rules, he proclaimed. If you and Hillary would like to schedule a session, we can discuss these concepts in more detail, he continued with genuine charm. I'll think about it, I said. I really wasn't sure what he was talking about. As soon as we got home, Hillary told me about her conversation with Chloe. She seems like a smart woman, but she let slip a couple of times about banks, Hillary said. She also mentioned that Chloe went out of her way to let her know that it was her money that paid for a lot of their lifestyle. Interesting, I replied. So far, in my opinion, Banks has been a nice guy, a bit of a charmer, but at this point, I don't see anything wrong with him. Wednesday night, Banks stopped by our apartment to show us a real estate prospectus. I'm not interested, I told him. He looked disappointed but quickly returned to his confident demeanor, as if my answer didn't hurt him. On Wednesday night, Hillary was burning with fatigue after 3 consecutive 10-hour shifts. Tonight was no exception. Banks was attentive and funny, which cheered her up. He inquired about her schedule, and she told him that Thursday was a day she could relax. Most Thursdays, she and I would go to the beach, where she could bask in the sun, swim in the ocean, and relax. So far, I have been able to get away on Thursdays, I added. What are your favorite beaches? Asked Banks. Kauai and Hapuna are our favorite places, Hillary replied. Then she looked at me and winked. We have visited M Beach several times since our first visit. We ended up inviting Banks to join us in Kauai Bay. I wanted her to continue getting to know Banks as much as I did. He turned out to be a good friend, and I imagined that he and Chloe could become our married couple. Hillary looked gorgeous, and a couple of times I caught him looking at her. I couldn't blame him, but a small flame of jealousy flared briefly. At one point, I got hot and went for a swim. Both Hillary and Banks refused. No big deal. When I came back from my bath, I saw them laughing and joking about something. But when I went back to the blanket, they stopped talking about it. On the way home, Banks asked us if we had been scuba diving. Neither of us had, but we were both interested. Banks told us about a place in Kona where you could take some lessons and get certified. We were interested, especially Hillary. The longer we lived here, the happier I got, and I wanted Hillary to love the lifestyle as much as I did. I was glad we could start a new hobby together. Banks said he had a boat and that he goes to a special place that has an amazing reef and always interesting sea life, I said. We agreed to go on a boat trip with him in a few weeks. When we got back to our apartment after Banks left, we discussed the previous day. You're right, he's a really nice guy. I enjoyed our day today, said Hillary. I was glad she felt that way. If he and Chloe were going to be our friends, I wanted us all to get along. Hey, what were you two laughing so hard about when I went swimming? I asked her. She looked at me, trying to remember what I had asked her, and then quickly looked away as the shadow of a smile flashed across her lips. Oh, nothing. Banks was just trying to make a joke, she said, and I thought she blushed. Funny, what's funny? I asked, perhaps too sternly. Nothing, just don't be so controlling, she said, and that was the end of it. We signed up for scuba diving lessons. The first step was to take the course online, which we did on Saturday. We met at one of the large hotel pools to use the equipment. The last step was 4 open dives to get certified. Banks told us that he was an instructor and suggested we practice on the day we planned to go boating with him. It seemed like a good idea. We met at the harbor and headed out to sea. We went past the airport by less than a mile. The water here was blue and calm. We put on our snorkeling gear, and Banks told us about the safety precautions the instructor had shown us at the hotel pool. He also assured us that the water here wasn't deep, and we would go down for a few minutes to make sure everything was okay. We put on short wetsuits and snorkeling gear. What about the sharks? Asked Hillary. There are occasional small reef sharks. I've only seen one once. Big ones like tiger sharks are not here, Banks explained. We walked down the stairs and cautiously began to explore the underwater world. It was beautiful. I had no trouble breathing. This is really cool, I thought. I began to sink deeper and felt the pain in my sinuses pressing against my head. I tried to ignore it, but the deeper I went, the more excruciating it became. I had to come up. Even at the surface, it wouldn't go away. I had to get out. I sat on the boat with no gear on, and gradually I started to feel better. My blood pressure seemed to go down after a few minutes. Banks and Hillary came out of the water and asked what was going on. I explained that I had a headache. Hillary started to go up the ramp to check on me, but I told them to keep diving. I was going to be fine. After a short conversation with me, I told them everything was fine. They continued the dive. After about half an hour, they surfaced. Hillary was so excited and seemed to be having a great time. I really hoped that the cause of my discomfort would not persist. As a thank you, we invited Banks over for dinner. We have developed a very friendly relationship over the past few weeks. When we came to Hawaii, I wanted to make good friends and have a social life. We seemed to be moving in the right direction. Every now and then, the fact that Hillary was comfortable with Banks caused flashes of jealousy, but I knew that was my problem and tried to suppress those impressions. Friday night was once again Pow night at the Palm. We found ourselves at a large table with Clarence and Lynn, the Platt family, and the Bankses. "Is Chloe coming?" I asked Banks. "No, unfortunately she's in Los Angeles for the next few weeks, probably on business for a big bank," he replied. I had to admit that he wasn't the least bit upset that his wife was away. We were all talking, socializing, eating, and drinking. At one point, I saw Hillary talking to a young Corey White. I waited a few minutes and joined them. They were talking about scuba diving. She told him about my problems, and he recognized that it was a real problem and that some people suffer from that kind of pressure. At that moment, a gorgeous blonde woman approached us. Corey introduced us. "This is my older sister, Kiki. She doesn't work at the Palms full-time but lives in our family condo when she's in Hawaii," says Corey. "She's blonde, slender, and beautiful, a walking Barbie doll," adds Corey. We found out that she is an independent IT professional, and also has an apartment in Santa Clara. During our brief conversation, I learned that she is divorced. "I love Hawaii and try to come here as often as possible," she says. I start to revisit my first impression of Corey. He seems like a pretty solid guy. Banks shows up at that moment, and the mood immediately changes. Kiki, who was talking and laughing just a moment ago, looks negative and goes silent. Corey has a look on his face like he wants to punch Banks. Banks is as charming as ever, oblivious to the negative sentiment. "What's going on here?" Kiki excuses herself, and Corey leaves without saying a word. It was weird. We start talking about scuba diving, and Hillary tells us how much she enjoyed it. Banks talks about different techniques and seems to have a lot of knowledge in this area. "Oh Brian, I hope we can find out what is making you uncomfortable." "I wouldn't want to stop, it's so much fun," adds Hillary. "Well, since I can't go, you certainly can," I say. "Right, and I'd be happy to be your guide," Banks adds. I hope he's just a good friend. Work for me ebb and flow, then suddenly becomes fluid. I spend my days in our bedroom analyzing commodity markets and talking to people on the phone. One of the keys to my success is the ability to dig deep. A weather event, such as a tornado, drought, or flood, can quickly change commodity prices. A few percentage points to one side or the other can make or lose big money. One of my high school friends, Dan Bain, is a climate scientist. To put it bluntly, Dan is very geeky and very smart. At the same time, he has all these weather forecasts for months in advance. Dan also still lives at home and doesn't use the phone. You'll have to meet him in person. Like I said, he's weird. There will be an agricultural conference in Seattle in a few weeks. That kind of information might be helpful too. My plan was to attend the 2-day conference and then stop by Dan's relatives in Federal Way and talk to Dan about a 3-day trip. Maybe Hillary would like to spend a few days in Seattle. I called my sales manager in the Seattle office, and told him about my plans. Brian, I think this is a great idea. It will go well with our mentoring program that starts next Monday, said my sales manager. I had completely forgotten about that commitment when I told them I was moving. My company had an ironclad rule about mentoring new employees. I was mentored, and it helped. Remote employees were assigned an apprentice who worked with them for 1 week straight and continued to help them afterward. After a week of one-on-one work, I agreed, as I had no choice. It would be almost 2 weeks, but we both had friends and relatives to catch up with. It sounded important. That night when Hillary got home, I told her about the trip to Seattle for 12 days. Brian, I can't do that, exclaimed Hillary. Why not? I asked. That would mean missing 2 weeks of shifts in a row, and I'm still on probation, she said. I don't know if I could take at least one of the weeks off, she continued. Geez, I didn't want to stay with her this long, but it's a sacrifice to live in a tropical paradise. The following week, I made an appointment with an ear, eye, nose, and throat doctor for my scuba diving problem. The Asian doctor asked me about my pain, examined my nose, throat, and ears. He paid special attention to my left ear. Mr. Rivers, you seem to have a problem with the eardrum in your ear. I would highly discourage you from engaging in underwater activities at depths greater than 10 feet. Snorkeling would probably be fine, but scuba diving could permanently rob you of your hearing, he said. Great, now I got Hillary hooked on Aqualung and can't participate. On Wednesday, Banks and I went for a run on Alea Drive. We discussed work and life. It didn't seem like he and Chloe had a particularly close marriage. We talked in front of the building as Hillary was coming home from work. What a day, she said. I can't wait to go to the beach tomorrow. I need to bask in the sun, swim in the ocean, and not think about work, she added. Tomorrow, at 9:30, said Banks. Ha, I thought. I was somewhat confused. I was glad he had become such a good friend that he was comfortable inviting himself, but he could wait until we asked him. Sounds good, Hillary said, and that was the end of it. Thursday morning, I was already up and working until 5 a.m. The markets were up and down, which was very unnerving. Most importantly, you had to be a few steps ahead of everyone else to make money. Suddenly, my door swung open. Brian, you're not ready. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Proclaimed Hillary. I completely forgot, I said. There was no way I could leave. Hill, honey, I don't think I can go today. At least not right now, I told her. I could see she was starting to get angry. That's when the phone rang. Before answering, I asked, can you just go with Banks? I asked. She looked at me long and hard, turned, and walked away. I answered the phone, and that was the end of it. Good thing we were in the same time zone, and by mid-afternoon, things were effectively over. I thought about getting dressed and trying to find them. I called Hillary, but she didn't pick up. I closed my eyes just for a moment. I told myself I must have fallen into a dead sleep because the next moment, Hillary kisses me. I realized from the shadows that it was about 6 o'clock, and so we made love. After a few minutes, she silently gets up and walks to the bathroom. The door closes, and I hear the shower turn on. After she comes out, I thank her for the pleasant homecoming, and I barely manage to get a smile out of her. I ask her about her beach day, and she replies that they went to Kua. I try to get the details of her day, but she's a little and uncharacteristically silent. If we hadn't just had incredible sex, I'd start to suspect I'd done something obscure. My work continues to be hectic, and Friday is another long day. Hillary is in and out of the apartment all day running errands. It's a relaxing weekend, but I still get the impression that something isn't quite right. When I ask Hillary, she replies that everything is fine. It's Monday, and the markets are volatile. I'm making money, but I'm making money. I do make a profit in my independent account. My goal is to retire early and enjoy life in Hawaii to the fullest. Hillary works her regular schedule Monday through Wednesday, Thursday mornings. I work hard, and she shows up around 9. "Are you going to the beach?" she asks. I look up, and she realizes the answer is no. I burrow into my notes and stay close to both computer screens. I have to leave for Seattle next Tuesday for meetings and mentoring, and I have a lot to catch up on by then. I'm stressed out. She kisses me on the cheek with a strange expression on her face, and just as I'm about to ask about the details of her beach day, the phone rings. Soon, I'm picking my way through soybean futures at 6:30 that night. The dinner table is set with sushi I bought in town. I sort of wanted to make it up to Hillary since I'd been so busy lately. By 7 o'clock, she still isn't home, so I finally call her. "Where are you?" I ask. "I'll be there in 2 minutes," she says. She shows up and thanks me for a wonderful dinner. I ask about how the day went, and it looks like she and Banks were at the beach again. I start doing deep, breathing exercises to stay calm. "What beach did you go to today?" I ask. She hesitates, looks away, and says, "Quab." For some reason, I feel like she's lying to me. I know I'm leaving in a few days, and I want to keep my cool, so I don't question her, at least for now. After dinner, we are both consumed with our thoughts. "Brian," she asks, "do you think we're getting the most out of life?" "It's really weird," I say. "I mean, don't you think our lives are boring? That there's more to the world than what we're experiencing?" "Not really," but I ask. I have no idea what she's getting at or where these deep, philosophical questions come from. "Oh, never mind," she says, and before we can continue our discussion, she snores softly. On Friday, all of a sudden, the markets were stable. I'm not sure how long this will last, but if typical patterns hold, the next few weeks should be manageable. I leave the office in the middle of the day on Friday, and Hillary is not at the apartment. I call her, thinking maybe we can do something fun this afternoon, but she doesn't pick up. I decide to make a run down Aya Drive. After my run, I head for the shower. It looks like Hillary is just finishing her shower. I'm hoping for 2 ships passing in the night. She leaves, and I head to the shower. She's not interested. Friday night is Pohana night. On the way downstairs, I ask Hillary about how the day went, but I don't get any specific answers about what she did all day. We set up in our usual spot near the Platts. Lynn and Clarence are there too. Banks is gone. To be honest, I was getting a little tired of him. Besides, it seemed like Hillary was spending more time with him than I was. I'm trying to keep my jealousy in check. I see Corey White, who I've grown to really like. We start talking, and he tells me about his research in marine biology. "It's pretty interesting, Brian. Why don't you come on the boat with me on Monday? I have something to test that day, and I think you'd be interested," said Corey. "Maybe, but at what time?" I ask. The markets have slowed down, and I'm working hard. Hillary works all day, so it seems like a good break. I'll be in port at 11. If you know where Redmond moors his boat, I'm a couple of slipways below that. That's the Key. You won't miss it? If you're not there by 11:30, I'll assume something's up, he told me. When I return to our table, I don't see Hillary. I try to act casual, but I can't seem to spot her. I talk to Clarence and Lynn, occasionally glancing over their shoulder in search of Hillary. After a few minutes, Clarence says, "I think I saw your fiancé outside the pool." "Oh," I say, and quickly cast a glance in that direction. Before I can control myself, he adds, "Don't worry, your friend Mr. Redmond was with her," perhaps with a note of sarcasm. "Go, my boy, find her," Clarence dismisses me, and I walk away. When I walk up to them, they seem to be having a tense conversation. I'm not sure I like the way Hillary looks at him, as if every word he says has serious meaning. They don't notice me until I'm practically right next to them. When they see me, Hillary looks flustered, like she's been caught doing something wrong. Banks and his charming personality. I'm starting to see that charm in a different context, Brian Banks exclaims and goes for a hug. I don't return the favor. What is this seclusion away from events? I ask. Hillary still hasn't said anything and looks like she's at a loss. Banks enters the conversation. "Sometimes the old gang gets a little stale," he says. "I was just describing some of my self-actualization exercises. With her intense profession, there are many ways to stay calm and deal with stress," he reflects. Hillary looks at me hopefully, hoping I'll believe all the nonsense that just came out of his mouth. "And Hill, since when did they know each other so well?" "Actually, Brian, we've been discussing the possibility of the three of us having some counseling sessions to broaden our outlook on life. As I said, I don't charge money for my sessions, this is my gift to humanity," he continues. I look directly at Hillary and say, "I'm going back to our friends, have 2 more beers, and then go home. You can join me if you want." I deliberately ignore Banks and all the nonsense he had just said, a gift to mankind. I walk back to our table, and about 30 seconds later, Hillary is next to me. "Why were you so mean to Banks, heck, your good friend?" she asks in a quiet but firm voice. I sit for a while and then tell her, I'm starting to sense something from him that I don't really like. "What are you talking about?" she asks. With all the stress that's been going on in my life lately, and knowing that I'm leaving for Seattle in a few days for almost 2 weeks, I really don't want to get into it with her. I make a silent vow to myself to distance myself from him as soon as I get back from my business trip. Hillary and I are also going to have a serious talk when I get back. "Never mind," I say. On Monday, I join Corey on the Key boat. We talk about his work, the ocean, and marine life in the area. It's really very interesting, and he seems to be passionate about it. "I'm working on a project with tiger sharks in the Hawaii Island area," he says. "I'm working with the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology. We have developed an experimental attractant that I believe will quickly lure sharks to the area where it is injected. If we learn what attracts them, we hope to redesign the process and create an effective repellent. I've actually never tried that combination, Brian, you will be the first witness to this challenge." Corey pulls what looks like an 8 ounces bottle out of a styrofoam cooler. He lowers a protein ball made from fish and seaweed into the water, then pours about half the container over it and lets it go. He then sets the timer on his watch. Corey tells me that sharks have an exceptional sense of smell and that tiger sharks can pick up odors up to a mile away. We watch and wait, nothing happens yet. "Just wait, I'm sure of it," he assures me. Suddenly, the surface of the ocean seems to change and come alive. I see my first dorsal fin, then another, and another. The protein globules are suddenly attacked and quickly devoured with brutal intensity. It's exciting and frightening. Corey explains that the tiger shark feeds indiscriminately. It has huge powerful jaws that can crack the shell of a turtle. Tiger sharks can reach 15 feet in length and are second only to the great white shark in size. They are considered primates of predators. The boat is bumped a couple of times, but within 15 minutes, the sea is calm again. That was exciting, I say to Corey. He seems pleased with the results and takes some time to type on his tablet. It certainly doesn't make me want to get in the water anytime soon, I add. It was a very unnatural situation, Corey tells me. Without the attractant, we never would have been able to lure the sharks here. Corey goes downstairs to hide his tablet, and I look at the vials in the styrofoam cooler.